to Gaza. There is so much to discuss. And as I said, I'm honored and want to bring on my friend and a great journalist and analyst who is the founder of one of the most important news outlets that has been covering Palestine for several decades. I'm talking about Ali Abu Nama, the executive director of Electronic Intifada. Ali, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you for your generous words and for all your great work. And of course, we just had you a couple of weeks ago on the Electronic Intifada live stream, so we always benefit from your insight, and we're very grateful for the work you do.
Thank you, Ali. I want to begin on this issue of Palestinian hostages, Palestinian captives, political prisoners. Pick up from where I left off and maybe explain to people what this is like for Palestinians as their loved ones are either freed from captivity or they go on a macabre quest to try to determine if the bodies that have been returned belong to their loved ones.
I think the thing that has been really galling for me is seeing all the tweets from Western political leaders and politicians celebrating with ecstasy that all the so-called Israeli hostages are now home and how wonderful this is for their families, recalling that the last 20 Israelis released were all soldiers, prisoners of war. Some of them even said they wanted to join the army and go straight back to helping to impose apartheid and settler colonialism and genocide on the Palestinian people. Yet these have all been presented as, these lovely, innocent people. Now, I won't deny the joy of anyone being released from captivity or their family, but they have just completely ignored the 2,000 Palestinians who are released and the many thousands more who are still in Israeli detention. And if you look at Palestinian media and social media over the last few days, what you see are these scenes of Palestinians embracing their loved ones who have just been released, sometimes in horrific condition, and there's been no attention to that. They're looking emaciated. They're looking like they have been through hell, because they have. They've been describing the utter degradation and humiliation that they have experienced in Israeli detention, including in the days going right up to their release. As Al-Damir, the Palestinian prisoners' rights group, said, the released prisoners appeared exhausted and frail, confirming that during the 4 days preceding their release, they were subjected to various forms of abuse and ill treatment, including severe beatings, humiliation, prolonged shackling, and threats not to speak to any media outlet about the conditions of their imprisonment. The prolonged suffering inside the occupation's prisons was evident on their faces and bodies. Many had lost dozens of kilograms and were visibly weak and fatigued. And let's recall, of course, Jeremy, that there is no imposed famine in Israel. It is Israel's choice to starve these detainees. The other thing that's worth noting is who many of these detainees are. For example, one of those who was released was Dr. Mohammed Abu Musa, a radiologist from Nasser Hospital in Gaza, who was kidnapped in February 2024 when occupation forces stormed the hospital and kidnapped him while he was on duty. Other medical personnel were released by the Israelis. Why were they even detained in the first place? And of course, there are many more doctors and nurses and medics who are still in Israeli custody, including Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya. And then if you look at the long-term prisoners who were released, some 250 long and life-term prisoners, the vast majority of them, 157, were members of Fatah. So they're not even members of Hamas, which shows that the Palestinian resistance is trying to represent and serve the entire political spectrum. Just over 60 of them were from Hamas, and the rest were from other factions. And most of them have gone into exile, been forced into exile by Israel to Egypt and other countries, of those long-term prisoners, which again shows that this is not really freedom. They're not being allowed to return to their homes and villages and towns and families. They're being forced into another kind of prison, the prison of exile. And then I just want to point finally, Jeremy, to uh, the fact that in this release, only a tiny handful of children were released by Israel, and I think just a couple of women. And Ad-Damir again notes that there are still over 9,000 Palestinians in Israeli prisons, including 52 women, 400 children, and more than 3,500 so-called administrative detainees. Those are people held without even the pretense of a charge or trial. And still more than 100 long-term and life sentence prisoners. So for all the joy of those being released, the vast majority of Palestinian political prisoners and prisoners of war are still in Israel's torture camps and dungeons.
Yeah, Ali, just to give people a bit of context about some of what you're saying here in the context of the ceasefire, when the Palestinian negotiating delegation was dealing with Trump's people and dealing with the Israelis, and this has been true in all of these negotiations, one of the primary stated goals of Operation Al-Aqsa Flood on October 7th was to free Palestinian prisoners and free Palestinian hostages from Israeli custody. In fact, Yahya Sinwar, the late leader of Hamas, he himself was freed from an Israeli prison in 2011 as part of an exchange deal for the Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit. And when Sinwar was in prison, he was there for 2 decades. He had studied the memoirs of Israeli intelligence officials, became fluent in Hebrew, and then translated those memoirs into Arabic and distributed them among other prisoners. And part of the reason that was listed as one of the top goals of Operation Al-Aqsa Flood is that history has shown that this is the only way that Palestinians who are given multiple life sentences by Israel ever see the light of day again. And the treatment of Palestinian prisoners has always been sadistic, torturous, grotesque, but it's gotten even worse since Itamar Ben-Gvir took over as the Minister of Interior Security. I mean, this is from the testimony we're reading and hearing of Palestinians that come out. The level of sadism, the intensity of the torture is increasing.
And it started before October 7th. I mean, this is really crucial to point out. Of course, for decades, it's estimated that more than 750,000 Palestinians have been put through Israel's prisons since the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza in 1967. That number dates from before October 7th. It's considerably higher now. And the treatment has always been terrible. We can go into that history, but the severe, deliberate degradation of that treatment, the deliberate imposition of extreme, cruel, and unusual degrading treatment, including denial of food, denial of medical care on a